Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out, and to be trodden under the foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And that is Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 down through 16. Well, welcome again to another Bible study from Ferry Baptist Church. I am your pastor, Raymond Steinkamp, and we're here just about a little less than a week from what I'm going to call one of the most important voting elections of our lives. Maybe the last time we get to vote with a two-party system. You never know. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little later in the video. But what I find so discouraging about many of the things that you see on Facebook is what Christians are posting. And some are posting that they're not going to vote at all, that they just can't vote for two evil men. Others think that they should not vote, should not be involved in the government, and others just take the stance that they're just going to wait on Jesus to come back and fix it all. And sometimes that thought pattern is a little more subliminal than many people realize, and that's exactly what they're thinking. They just don't verbalize it like that. And I wanted to do this video tonight and talk a little bit about why we as Christians should we vote, and if we should, why should we? Why should it be important to us? I want us to keep in mind, most people live by the principle. They say, there's two things you don't discuss in public, and that is politics and religion. And I like what I heard many years ago, and it's just stuck with me about this. Those are the two most important decisions you'll ever make in your life. Government is how you will live while you are here, or politics is how you will live while you're here. Religion determines how you're going to live when you leave here and go into the next world. So those are the two most important things in life. Why is it that we're so afraid of discussing them? And of course, most of the time it comes down to immature people unable to control their emotions, and therefore they can't have a logical discussion about anything. But tonight we're going to talk about this because Christians are called to be salt, and we are called to be light. We have a truth to bring to this world. The Great Commission doesn't say, wait until I come back and I'll fix everything. The Great Commission says, go out and make disciples of the world. Basically, Jesus has said, I raised from the dead, so now go out and claim the nations. He is ruling and reigning now upon that throne. And yes, just to answer that question for you, if Jesus was here, who would he be telling us to vote for? Well, nobody, because he's ruling and reigning. He would not be holding an election. He is a monarchy. And he would be ruling and reigning here because he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But I want you to turn to Romans and chapter 13. Romans and chapter 13 as we begin looking at this. And of course, we as Christians need to live as good citizens. As much as possible, we need to live as good citizens. But of course, there are times where we cannot just be law-abiding citizens when the government is doing that which is evil, and that goes into a little different category than what we're going to be talking about tonight. Mainly what we're going to be talking about tonight is living as a citizen here, being a good citizen, and also living doing our civic duty that we should be doing, because while we're here upon this earth and in this world, government is going to determine how we live here, how many taxes we pay, how we even worship, because most churches enjoy those 501c tax exemptions, but that may not always be there. And yes, that's going to change how we worship. For some, church doors are going to close. They're not going to be able to stay open. These big salaries these big pastors get, they're not going to be afforded anymore, and they're not going to get the tax breaks that they get. the pastoral homes that they live in, and things such as this are just not going to be provided. For others, it's going to be that there are going to be no churches, and they're going to be home churches rather than the church buildings that we enjoy today. So yes, it is important whether or not we vote. But now let's see what the Word of God has to say. Verse 1 of chapter 13, it says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." In other words, those that are in charge, those rulers that are there, they're there because God has placed them. Now, yes, some are raised up like King David to do good things and to raise a nation. Others are like Pharaoh, that God may show his power in them, and they will be judged and judged harshly and severely, even in this life here. But they are nevertheless placed there by God. And it says in verse 2, "Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, that they and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation." Now, this is the thing. A lot of Christians today want a government-less society. In other words, they want a society with no government. Now, I think government should be limited, but we cannot live without a government. Government is part of God's ordained plan. Even the early church realized this. The church is set up with a church government that others are accountable to. Your pastor even should be accountable to the government of your church there. And we need government in society. Those early pilgrims that came over here learned very quickly that, hey, we need a form of government here, because why? There is evil in this world. There are wicked men in this world. Not everyone is seeking good and the best for everyone. And they signed that Mayflower Compact there. And they had come together there and committed themselves to serve the Lord and to live in peace with one another, and even had rulers there that helped to govern them. And even our government today is set up from them early Puritans there, and we have the checks and balances in place there to keep our government and our government officials honest as possible. And we need to realize this, that government is a necessary evil. Thomas Paine even wrote that in his writings on common sense there, that this government is a necessary evil. We must have it, but we must keep it in check. And Christians need to realize that government is placed there by God. It is needed, but also that we have a civic duty of ourselves there to be a part of it, because it does regulate how we live as well as how we worship. And we need to always keep that in mind when we're thinking about why we should vote and the government and should we serve in it. I have said from my pulpit, there are people that God leads into government, and they should be, and we should go there and establish the law of God. Use it there as a guideline there of telling us about the laws that we make, whether they're just or not. And things that are needed in our government, that we may live peaceably with one another, and that we may do one another right. And yes, to make sure that criminals are being punished justly. I don't think it's right to lock a man up for his entire life. If he's committed a crime that is so severe that he should be taken off the streets for his entire life, then he should be put to death. That's biblical. If you've committed murder, if you've committed rape, or you've killed others in some way, that yes, your life ought to be taken. Now, that's not always the case, but yes, it is for those severe crimes that are committed. And I do believe that for some of the other crimes that are committed that are not as offensive, that there's people locked away from their family. If they go back to the biblical principles of making you pay back the damage and what you tear up fourfold, a lot of people would learn their lessons and stop all of this. And yes, there would be a time where you would lock someone up if they were so belligerent and disobedient and things such as this, but we're taking low-level criminals and we're locking them up with high-level criminals, and we're making the low-level criminals even worse criminals by putting them in there with the others. And it is such a burden on our system. It costs the taxpayers so much money to feed and to house and to clothe and to give medical care to these inmates that just is not required if we would do things a whole lot different. And what's even more sad about this is that you get better health care in the prison system than what you're going to get at a nursing home, and it's free in a prison system, but where in a nursing home it's costing you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. That's pretty sad there. But let's carry on with our reading here. It says in verse 3, "For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same." In other words, live as a good citizen. "For he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil." In other words, the government is there to keep the peace. The government is there to judge the wicked. The government is there to execute the righteousness there that is required, that we might live together in harmony. And the government is there, part of an extension of God's arm. He uses that. So therefore, it is not for us just to resist government for the sake of resisting government. Now, yes, there are times we fight back. There are times that we speak out. Yes, there are times of war that we need to undertake there. Those are extreme measures and should be well thought through, and be sure that the cause is just in this. And yes, it should always be pertaining to those that are without, those that are poor, and those that are helpless, being abused by our government. Yes, it is of course a time to fight, but other than that, no, that is not always just to go up against our government. The Christians were not seeking to overthrow the Roman government at the time. They didn't like it. They didn't like the way they were treated in this, but yes, they understood that God was using that. God was using that to accomplish his purpose here. Look at this in verse 5. He says, "Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake." In other words, don't be a good citizen just because you might go to jail. You know, that's what gets me about many people. You ask them, you talk about certain crimes and things, and say, "Oh, I wouldn't do that because I'm afraid I'm going to go to jail." Well, that just tells me you're a criminal at heart. You're just more afraid of going to jail than you are of being right about things. It ought to be for the Christian. Not only will I not do that, I'll not rob a bank, not only because I don't want to go to jail for 40 years, but because it's wrong. It's not something you ought to do. I'm not going to cheat on my taxes because, yes, if the government finds out, I'm going to be in trouble about it, but also because it is wrong. We should not do that. We should be glorifying God with how we live our lives. Verse 6 says, "For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing." Now, there's two aspects to this. One, yes, we ought to pay our taxes. We have to pay our taxes to have some of the government services that we enjoy having. And yes, it is needed, but also we need to be able to pay those that work in government. Now, some of the salaries they're getting paid these days and the benefits are quite extreme and ought to be cut back. But yes, they are worthy of being paid. And yes, we as Christians ought to pay our taxes in this. Because we need them to rule over us, and they need to be able to financially be able to do this, as well as provide some of the services that they provide. So we see that. Now, there does come a point where you're overtaxed. You're taxed too much. Many don't realize that the Revolutionary War was begun over a 3% tax rate. Imagine if our founding fathers lived today, what the war would be today, because we pay much more than that 3% tax rate. But yet we still see these are all ordained by God. So yes, Christians ought to vote. They ought to be involved in their government. There are some even out there, maybe you're listening to this video and God has led you to this, that you're considering running for some kind of office, whether it be something local or something statewide, or even something on the federal level there. If you are a Christian, don't be afraid afraid to do it if that's what God has called you to do. But I do want to caution you, it is a very hard thing to do, and to live righteously and not become corrupted like many others have been. As a Christian, you're going to be faced with those challenges. And yes, when you get in there, it's not just a career. It is about serving God. But now, we've come to the halfway point of this video. And yes, we do see how it is our civic duty. It is a Christian duty to vote, because it does affect how we live as well as how we worship. It costs the church money, and we have to be aware of these things. So that's why, yes, Christians should vote. We vote not only for that, but also how the rest of the nation is going to live, whether we're going to be a God-blessed nation or not. Because, yes, we need to be voting our conscience. We need to be voting the Word of God. We need to be voting righteousness. We need to be voting the law of God. But then we come to the conundrum that we have today, because many ask today, well, preacher, who should I vote for? Because I hear so many different voices out here. We hear people like John Piper, and I used to like John Piper, but I do disagree with him on his stance on about who we should vote for. Rather not vote at all than to have to cast a vote for Donald Trump. I think that is terrible advice. I think that's awful for Christians to do. We're just inviting the devil in. When you don't vote, you're actually casting a vote for the other candidate, really, because your vote would count, and it does count. And it's so sad to see Christians act this way. But now you may be saying, well, who should I vote for in this? Should I vote for Biden, or should I vote for Donald Trump? Now, this is where we're faced with here, because we have to ask ourselves, we know we're voting between the lesser of two evils, and so for some people, their conscience bothers them to think that they voted for either one of these men, because there is evil on both sides here. You have the Biden-Harris ticket there, where we know they are far left. They are pro-abortion. They vote for killing babies. They think you ought to be able to abort a baby all the way up to the time of its birth, and even some have said for months and even a year after the birth of the child, you ought to be able to kill the child. Now, that is far extreme, and that is horrible. But not only that, we find the Marxism and the socialism in this, and if you go back and study any history, you see the millions of people who have died under these regimes there, whether they were starved at, whether they was maliciously murdered. The crime rate soars, poverty soars, hunger, disease, they soar, and even the economy collapses. But then you find that they don't care about their people. Look at China. They don't care about their people. I believe they released this COVID-19 on purpose to kill off many of their people. They were using it and testing it, and I think it worked a lot better than they ever thought it was going to work, because it became worldwide there. But still, they don't care about their people. You look at Hitler, you look at Mussolini, you look at any of them, Pol Pot there, you look at any of them, they just killed their people, they tortured them. And this is where this all leads to. It's nothing but death, destruction, and poverty. And that's what we have to look forward to. And I just want to add this on to this idea about the Biden-Harris ticket, because really it's just the Harris ticket on this, because we look at this, and the only way they're going to get somebody that far left voted in is to have somebody like Joe Biden, the presumed nice guy that's up there, just the face of the party there, which really is kind of odd, because, you know, they have this big problem with old white guys, which Joe Biden is, and then we find out that he's somewhat sexually perverted, because he's sniffing children every time you turn around, and then there's been accusations of him touching people, and now we have this issue coming out with Hunter Biden, and how they have profited from him being, while he was vice president at the time, how he was profited. And of course, you can't ever forget the little meme that comes up there on Facebook pretty regular, where they say, well, didn't Trump put little kids in cages? And Obama has to raise his hand and say, no, that was me. And then they say, well, now, didn't Trump collude with Russia? And Hillary Clinton has to raise her hand and say, no, that was me. And then they say, well, now, didn't Donald Trump have have the quid pro quo with the Ukrainian government there, and then Joe Biden has to raise his hand and say, no, that was me. I had to do all that. Everything they accused Trump of doing, they have been caught themselves doing. But then you have the flip side of this. You have Trump in this, and then many want to claim that he's a Christian, and I know some people get upset with me, but I don't believe that Donald Trump is a Christian. No, I do not know his heart, but I do see his works, and he does have a foul mouth, and yes, he is very arrogant, and yes, he is a womanizer, and yes, I believe he had an affair with Stormy Daniels, and I do believe that he's cheated on his wife on numerous occasions. I do believe that he is rather immoral. Like I said, he is very arrogant, very proud, says stupid things. I don't even like to sit and listen to him give a speech, but you weigh all of that in against the Marxism and the communism and the far left agenda and killing babies. I think the choice becomes pretty clear. And these are the choices that are given to us by God. This is what's been ordained before us today, and we need to get a grip on this. Even as Christians today, yes, we need to vote. We don't need to have bad eschatology that basically says we'll wait around till Jesus comes and then he's going to fix all this mess. No, that's not what the Bible teaches us to do. We're to go out and be the salt of the earth, to be the light to this world, and we're to go out and cast our vote. And I don't have a problem about telling who I voted for, because I voted a straight Republican ticket. And that's all there's to it, because I cannot vote for baby killers. Do I say that the people that I voted for are morally perfect? Absolutely not. Do I say they're all Christians? Absolutely not. Do I say they're better than what we have, the other choice we have? Yes, they were the lesser of the two evils at the time. And you know, if that's not enough to convince you, we need to look at communist California. And yes, I said communist California because that's what it is. You look at the lockdowns they're requiring, you look at how they've set down guidelines for how you to have your holiday celebrations and things such as this. You'll see how the government wants to intrude into people's lives, and this is all a test here to see how much the government can intrude into your life and how much you're willing to take. And yes, a vote for the Biden and Harris ticket there will be a vote for communism. It is a vote for persecution. It is a vote for killing and murdering innocent people, the poor, those that you say you're so worried about. That's what it is actually for. And this is what I believe is going to take place if Biden actually wins there. Now, yes, the day after he is declared the President of the United States, guess what? The sun is still going to rise. Most of us are going to go to work like we've always gone to work, and things are going to be somewhat the same, but then they're slowly going to start to change. There are going to be laws that are made. I don't actually believe that Biden is going to serve the first year of his presidency. He's either going to be, he's going to die mysteriously, he's going to die of natural causes, or he's going to be deemed unfit mentally and incompetent, and Harris is going to take over, because it's the only way to get somebody that far left into the presidency there. And yes, if Nancy Pelosi wins Speaker of the House again, guess what? You're going to have a Kamala and Pelosi ticket there. That's what you're going to have as president and vice president. And then all I can say is God help us, because we're going to slowly move into socialism. Your taxes are going to go sky high. The middle class is going to begin to disappear again. And these are going to take place. Now, what about Trump? You say, well, Trump is immoral. He's no better. Why should we vote for him? Well, we had a recovering economy. We had the lowest black unemployment that we have ever seen. We've had world peace. You notice we don't have the wars we had under Obama and Biden, do we? We got peace now because, hey, all these nuts know that this president will retaliate against you. Trump is concerned about protecting our borders and building that border wall. No, it's not anybody's right to live in America. It is a gift to live here. It is not something that is required of anybody to be told you have to be able to live in America. No, it is a privilege to live here in America, and we need to live like this. And yes, Trump has denounced all white supremacy. He has denounced it 38 times in the media, and the liberal media will not cover it. in this, but we see an economy recovering. And then let's talk about the pandemic for just a minute. This so-called pandemic we've got, where you have a 99.6% survival rate of a coronavirus there. And this is the thing. I work in healthcare, and I remember at the beginning of all of this, all the misinformation that you got, and some of the information just was not just wrong. It was actually used to cover up their lack of supplies that they had to be able to give you. You were given the wrong information on purpose. And then, of course, you were being told to begin with, if you have the virus and you don't have symptoms, you can work anyway. And then they said, oh no, we don't want you to do that because you'll be spreading the virus. This is the point I want to make with this. Nobody knew. Nobody knew, because this was all brand new. No one knew all the symptoms that come along with this coronavirus. No one knew how it affects you and how it transmits from person to person in the beginning. And you know what? I believe they have handled this very well for something brand new, something unexpected, something they've never faced before. They've done quite good. And we see how Trump recovered from his by taking that cocktail of antibiotics there. There is a cure for this, and yet not everybody can have it. Yet not everybody's it's gonna be out there. And then I'm almost willing to bet you that after this election, depending on how it goes, you won't hear any more about it. Everybody will be over the COVID virus. Most people are telling me now that I run across, we're over all of this. We're beyond all of this. We're tired of it. We're sick of it. We're moving on. We don't see the mass devastation there. What we see is the economic devastation, because what? We run around here and let the government close businesses like a communist nation there. The government said you can't open your doors, and they don't. And then people like Nancy Pelosi goes and gets one of them to open up so she can get her hair done, but you can't get your hair done. I know people now that have not had haircuts since April of this year. They've not had haircuts. A lot of them are right there in the nursing home. We took dying people who are in the last stages of their life and locked them away, isolated them, put them in a room and made them stay in a room and would not let them out for months. And then we had them all tight quartered inside of a building there, and somebody brought the coronavirus in. It came in by a staff member, and guess what? Infected the entire building. I think there were only 2 to 3 people that didn't test positive for the coronavirus out of the entire building of residents there. And, all because we were confined there. All because, and then that doesn't count the number of staff members that wound up with the coronavirus, and thank God I have not. But there again, that just tells you about the handling of the coronavirus there. Nobody knew, nobody understood. And here it would be 10 times as worse if we'd listened to the liberal left there. They wanted to shut everything down. They wanted everybody to sit at home. They wanted everybody to sit and collect a government check there. And there's just so many aspects to this I would love to cover. Personal responsibility. Why it is that people don't want to take personal responsibility anymore. Nobody wants to work and earn a living there. All this rioting and everything that's going on here, are they not all liberal cities? Are they not just the liberal mayors, Democrats there, encouraging this to take on? And then we have presidential candidates that encourage this to go on and would not condemn it, and nobody will say a word. But I have a word of encouragement for you here, because the way I look at it here, it is Trump against all the liberal media, as well as all the Democrats there, and half the Republicans, and yet he's still just about undefeatable. Just about undefeatable. So that is a glimmer of hope in all this. So, to just sum up everything here, should Christians vote? Absolutely. You have a civic and a moral duty to vote, because if you don't, you're basically letting the other side win, and they have nothing but an evil agenda that is against the church, that is against holiness and against righteousness. As well as, you may say, who should I vote for? Well, yes, you are picking the lesser of two evils, and you are picking an immoral man, which would be Donald Trump, is who I would say that you need to vote for our freedoms to be able to worship and to conduct business as we have in the past. And yes, it is a lesser of two evils, and no, I don't think it's a sin to cast a vote for Donald Trump. Do I think we should vote for Biden? Absolutely not, because he is just a figurehead for the communist and the socialistic agenda of the far liberal left, and he is not going to be your president long. It's going to be the Harris ticket. It's going to be Kamala Harris, which, by the way, there is some question about whether or not she's actually was born to parents that were actually citizens at the time, because if her parents were not citizens then and she was born here, then guess what? She's not qualified to be president. She cannot take the office legally by our Constitution, but that's a story for another time there. Well, we've come to the end of the video, and I know I've been there a lot of different places and repeated a lot of different things over and over, but I want you to get the point there that we have a civic duty to vote. We have a civic duty to even serve as Christians in the political realm there, as well as we should be casting our votes for Donald Trump. And let me tell you something, these colors don't run. I wore this shirt on purpose here because these colors don't run, and we need to stop running as Christians. Well, God bless you until we meet again.